Rucka Rucka Ali, YouTuber, million subscribers. How is that going?
It's going okay. I'm hoping to get to 2 million sometime in the next 10 years. So we'll see.
I guess it's gonna take much less than that. No?
Well, YouTube just deletes the videos and the channel, and then they delete the subscribers too. So it's just a matter of trying to release content faster than they're deleting it.
How many lyrics you have written in this?
Probably like 100 songs, if I had to estimate.
Where it came from, the Rucka Rucka Ali?
I started making music. I thought it would be a lot of fun to kind of create this larger than life presentation of things and music and ideas. And, over time, I just wanted to see how much further I can push things. And at this point, it's gotten so high, it's all about to fall over maybe. But as I continue to venture into the world of commentary, as I work on projects involving philosophy, I think that's probably going to change. Ultimately, I'm just going to kind of branch out and have like kind of a separate sort of persona, and and kind of separate the entertainment brand from the commentary one moving forward. At some point, these things tend to flow naturally.
It came with like a DJ, was the first thing in 2006.
DJ Not Nice. That wasn't the first thing, but yeah, one of my earliest songs was Smoke Tree. That was the third song. And it went, nigga pre, everybody in the house smoke tree. I'm Viet Cong, do I rook Chinese? So right from the start, you can see this fascination with all things Oriental. So this was not like some later gimmick I came up with. This was always a big part of the real me.
It sounds awesome. How we evolved from being a rapper to become a parody maker? Is that the title we should use? Parody maker?
I don't know. It's hard to say anymore. Like I started rapping as it was kind of supposed to be this like funny thing that's like kind of making fun of rap, but also making fun of people that make fun of rap. And then, just kind of making fun of the whole situation. And after a couple years of doing that, I made a parody as a project for a radio station where I was interning, just because I hoped to play it on the radio. I thought that would be the most exciting thing. So then I put it on YouTube, and it like blew up by the standards of those days. Like, thousands of views was like a big deal to me back then. Still is a big deal, but I mean, today it's like, people, they post a video, and if it doesn't get 25,000 views in the first few minutes, they think it's like a failure. Back then, like 1,000 views a day was like a big deal. So I was like, oh, wow, this is good. All right, I'll make another one like these. And, then it kind of became a big part of what I'm known for. But I also always really was into that. Like I was always doing parodies since early in life. So it wasn't so much.
So it's like a kind of a natural talent.
It's something I've always been into. It's something I've always done. So to kind of integrate that with the rap project that I was doing was a lot of fun, because I established this irreverent approach and this kind of larger than life persona. Integrating that with this love of parodies meant I could pretty much say anything I want in the form of a song parody. And it kind of it paints this whole world. It paints the world a certain way.
Was some artist really your star, and who led you to do this, something like this?
I think there are influences, like old Eminem, I think influenced me when I was young. I wasn't a very big fan of Weird Al, but like I knew of him, so I think that kind of influenced me a little bit. Other music I heard growing up that was sort of on the funny side. Even children's music, I think, tends to be pretty clever, because kids have high expectations. Like it needs to be kind of decent. It's like with kids movies, there's like always a hero, and there's a story and a resolution. It's not like a lot of it's not like a lot of movies for adults. I don't mean pornography. I mean like or really, this applies to pornography too. The plot is often stupid. There's usually no hero. There's no meaning. There's no journey. But kids have higher expectations. So really, yeah, just anything that was sort of clever lyrically, that I was exposed to, I think influenced me. But I've always just been to doing my own thing. So I would say just my own development, like even just like reading, trying to study as a kid, trying to memorize things, and I would start turning it into a song, like turning it into a tune, like trying to memorize every capital in
So
Europe.
like your brain works through like melodies.
Yeah, it's a great way to memorize stuff. Like I know the quadratic formula because it was taught to me with a tune. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. See, I know it because of the tune. And maybe someone out there, well, you're Asian, you can probably tell me if I got it wrong. Someone might say, oh no, actually it's 4ab, not 4ac. So, but I think I got it right.
When was the first time you made your own first original lyrics?
When I was, I think, well, it's hard to say because I was probably doing it really young, but the first one I remember right now is when I was 12 and I started, I thought Slim Shady, the first time I heard it, I thought he was saying Ramsini, like a magician, Ramsini. So when I found out it was Slim Shady, I decided, all right, well, then my name is Ramsini. And then I started, I stayed up one night in bed, like making up this whole, like, I went, my name is Ramsini and I'm married to a whore. She gets a lot of business, but we're still very poor. Her last name is Sucker and her dad's name is Dick. No wonder people call her the daughter of a faggot. So I had a dirty mouth and I was offensive right from the start. People think, oh, he's just offensive, because he thinks it sells. He's offensive because it's a gimmick. No, it's not a gimmick. This is the real me. I've been doing this as long as
that.
Yeah.
That is real Rucka.
This is the real me. Yeah. So so that's what I remember making up. So that song went on for a few more.
So it was like that, laying down and then popping up the entire lyrics. You did not like it was not like it was sub-it like that, and not something that you would have to sit and meditate and work on it for weeks. It was more like natural, like it came into your mind like that.
I mean, it took focus. I remember like staying up at night and like memorizing this thing that I was writing and then like reciting it later. So it took focus. But yeah, it was what I enjoyed. I was always a creative writer. I mean, anytime there was a creative assignment in English class or whatever, I was always excited to do that. And I always took it seriously and saw how good I can make it. I wasn't cynical about the fact that it was a class project and that's nerdy. I was like, no, this is an opportunity. So yeah, it's sort of like, I guess, comes naturally, whatever that means. But it wasn't, I mean, but like there are writing projects that do take weeks or even years in some cases. I mean, I have a song about the Pope living in the Vatican. That one, when that song was popular, Living in the Hall of Fame by whatever their name is, the band, The Script maybe, I don't know. Living in the Hall of Fame. I remember coming up like living in the Vatican, because the Pope was visiting at that time. I think he was visiting, or he was crowned. The new Pope was anointed, and I remember, and the world's gonna know you're gay. But at that time, I thought to myself, like, I said, I can't write like a full song parody with just that. So I kind of left it alone. And then a few years later than that, I heard the song, the Pope was now visiting the US, and I remembered that idea, and I thought to myself, like, oh, I could totally write that. So what seemed like too big of a task, I suddenly realized, like, oh no, I can definitely do that. I have a new song that I just recorded a couple days ago that'll be out. This is an exclusive, The Fanny Show. Is that what your show is called?
It's Fanny Anzai, yeah, my channel. It's
all right. It's an exclusive. So I wrote I had the idea for a song about the Earth being flat, and
that is an amazing subject.
It's an amazing subject. So I think this was like 7 or 8 or 9 months ago. I had this idea, and I started writing it, and then I said, all right, this isn't that good. And then I put it away, came back to it a month later, wrote a bit more, then said, this isn't that good. You know, over and over. Finally, like a month ago, I finally just looked at it with a fresh set of eyes and said, oh, this is going to be great. So I finished writing it, and then, you know, just recorded it and been working on the video. It's like, it makes me laugh, you know, even though I'm the one who wrote it. Like watching this video that I'm working on, I'm like, this is good stuff. So, I mean, it can sometimes take weeks or months or years, maybe decades. Maybe there'll be a project that'll only emerge after a full lifetime.
Then you die, you find some little notes.
Yeah.
Someone comes and records.
I'll leave a note behind.
Since we talked about such a serious subject, you have attempted suicide, and this is a little touchy of talking about as a problem that a lot of people face. I think pretty much everybody will face this situation.
They might. I mean, I think there's such a big topic of just how to approach this, because psychologists, which is it's a field that emerged in the 20th century, and it's in the form that we recognize it, came at a time when scientists don't recognize that people are conscious. They don't take consciousness seriously. So if I try telling somebody, oh, the reason you're depressed is because you've been collecting these ideas your whole life, like ideas of what's moral and what's true and how you should behave and what you should think is true. And you've got all these contradictions, and it's driving you crazy, and you have no purpose, you have no direction. He'll just say, oh, no, that's not scientific, that's just philosophy. But, depression, quote unquote, that's a medical condition. That's mental health, as they call it. So there's a lot to say about that. But, I mean, you asked about me and my experience. So I was very uncomfortable as a teenager. I was very angry, very unhappy, very, like, kind of, the more I learned about the world and people, the more I was disappointed, and I was frustrated, and I was smoking weed, and I kind of kept wanting to stop, but I couldn't, and it became like all I cared about. And other drugs, it turned into, I discovered amphetamines. That became my new favorite thing, and of course that loses its edge if you do it regularly. So as I was going through all of this, I also had big dreams. I wanted to live a good life, and but I was living with contradictions, and I was feeling very uncomfortable in my own skin and in my own skull. So as a teenager, I used to look up, I don't know if there was Google yet. I don't know if Google was popular. I don't remember, but maybe it was on Yahoo. I would search like ways to commit suicide. And I never actually attempted it until I was 19, when I don't remember exactly what drove me to it. I just remember feeling very uncomfortable, and it was a mixture of like an internal feeling and also externally seeing that I had no future, thinking like there's just nothing to look forward to. So the method that I tried was to take the remaining pills in a bottle of Excedrin PM, which is a very weak sleeping aid, pain reliever. So somebody might say, if I really wanted to die, I would have found a more sure way to go. And maybe this was subconsciously me kind of attempting it without really giving it my best shot. But I did swallow maybe like 60% of a bottle of Excedrin PM, and then got into bed and wrote a note that I don't remember what I wrote, and then fell asleep. And I woke up around 4 a.m. with incredible nausea and pain. I crawled to the bathroom and vomited painfully, very painfully. But also, like, as this was happening, realizing, okay, I'm still alive. Looks like I'm not going anywhere for now. And things got much better over the preceding years. Obviously, I grew. I made some. My career, as we know it, came about just a couple short years after that, because I worked at it, because I decided to keep trying at it. And philosophically, I kind of found my way. I quit smoking weed and I quit drinking, and I really took that seriously, because I saw that as an important part of everything else, career as well as happiness. And finally, in 2016, in around this time, a little after. No, I mean, we're having this conversation in July, so around I think September of 2016, I wrote a parody of the song "Closer" by Chainsmokers, and it's about suicide, and it's kind of it's morbid, but it's also kind of a joke. Like it's sort of both. It walks that fine line, and then I decided in the closing, like in the end of the video, I'll write a written message saying, this is, I don't remember exactly what it said, but 10 years after my failed suicide attempt, I want to give a message of hope. If I had died in the summer of 2006, then Rucka Rucka Ali would have never been born. And a lot of people, of course, commented and contacted me saying how much that meant to them and how much my jokes and comedy has helped them. And that's really nice. But that shouldn't be what keeps anybody going. I mean, comedy is great, and entertainment is a vital part of life, as is art. But I mean, the battle is bigger than that. The battle is really about every individual saying, like, what do I want? Do I believe it's possible to be happy? Do I believe success is possible? What does success mean to me? And am I willing to work for it? Because most people are addicted in some respect, either to a substance or to a pattern of behavior that is very complacent. So if you're as an individual, if you're willing to put yourself through some discomfort on your way to getting what you want, I think good times are ahead. And since that time, I've also begun talking about philosophy, and I've begun talking about sobriety, and I've also gotten more people contact me since then saying, thanking me for that, and that of course is really nice. Assuming
that's why you keep yourself that open and accessible to your audience. You like this feedback.
I mean, having a conversation is always interesting to me, and I mean, when people do tell me like, oh, this something that I did has helped them, I need to take it with a grain of salt, because I don't know this person, so they could just be saying it for attention. That's something I would have done when I was young. If I met, my favorite artist or anybody who I considered famous, I might start telling them, oh, you've influenced my life so much. I might have exaggerated a bit, because you're looking for something to bond with this person over, and you're excited and all of that. So
yeah,
I don't take the hatred. I try not to take the hatred from people, but also even some of the really nice things people say, if I don't really know anything about them, I sometimes don't really take it that seriously either, because I don't know. But it is great. Yeah, it is great.
That's nice. Yeah. The first song that opened the career of a parody maker 10 years ago and more than 1 million subscribers is I Can Do Whatever, I'm White.
That's it.
I guess because of that, you probably been accused of being racist for a good amount of people. So how much love and hate you take from the same art you produced? How is that?
So I Can Do Whatever, I'm White was pretty tame compared to what I've done since then. So at the time, I got a lot of comments and messages. Back then, you could message people on YouTube. And I remember someone messaging me saying, like, fuck you, you think you can do whatever you want because you're white? So, yeah, people were offended. But then, but other people interpreted it differently. They were saying, oh, no, this is a social statement. He's saying that there's white privilege. So, there's always people who like it will take what they want from it often, I've seen. And people that are triggered by it will interpret it. I mean, a lot of people who also they were upset by it because they thought that I'm criticizing white people in an inappropriate.
The arguments that you put in that song, where did those things come from?
Well, the only white privilege, I think, was running red lights. Other than that, I talked about getting away with things that only white people do, like at the time I said wearing shorts above your knees, like short shorts. Today nobody wears. Today it's flipped. So in the sequel to that song, in the anniversary edition that I released a few months ago, I said I can wear What was it? Something about low short. Right from the start, you can see this fascination with all things Oriental. I have a new song that I just recorded a couple days ago that'll be out. This is an exclusive about the Earth being flat. If I had died in the summer of 2006, then Rucka Rucka Ali would have never been born. And I mean, the battle is bigger than that. The battle is really about every individual saying, like, what do I want? Do I believe it's possible to be happy? Do I believe success is possible? What does success mean to me? And am I willing to work for it? If you're as an individual, if you're willing to put yourself through some discomfort on your way to getting what you want, I think good times are ahead.
I'm a physician, like those myths and truths in talking about some controversial subjects that relate to health. Mm-hmm. And vegan is a big deal.
Our vegan said, "Oh, great! Finally, we get a song too. Like, this is my new theme song." So, I mean, vegans rhymes with heathens, which was the 21 Pilots song. So, the creative process just kind of goes the way that it does. It's like once I have like kind of a one line or kind of a theme, like with the Pope or with I can do whatever, I'm white. It's like you just kind of write around that, and there is a craft to it. You are kind of using building blocks. It does need to cohere. It does need to be sort of consistent with itself. I really don't like lyricists, and it used to be a lot of people were doing parodies. Back when I started, it was a very popular thing for people to do on YouTube. And some of them would just say the most random things. Like they would just throw in the most random lyrics. This guy named Computer Nerd, like 6581, like a bunch of numbers. He was so unfunny. I hate to be negative, but he would just say the most random things. But yeah, I do see it as a project. I do see it as like a writing project. So it does need to kind of paint a certain picture with words.
Is there anything that you're most proud and or something that you don't like and you're ashamed, but and how you deal with it? Have you deleted something because oh no, this is garbage?
Oh, good question. I mean, back in the day, I did a song called Banana Peels, which was sort of, the song was Battlefield, and I did Banana Peels, and I did like this dramatic song. Some people love it so much. Some people really loved that song. I just remember being like, this was not my best. And also things that I wrote when I was going through like tough times, like around the time that I quit drinking and I quit smoking weed, I was sort of at my worst, I felt, and the early stages of sobriety also I felt like I wasn't inspired, so I was just kind of writing out of habit. So a lot of what I kind of released back then, I don't find funny, I think, because of what I associate with it. But some of my most popular things also were written around that time, like Only 17. There's a classic song that just won't go away, Only 17. It was, and the Justin's Beaver, that was a really popular thing that I wrote around that time too.
The Only 17 was just like a parody, or was kind of like a personal experience?
It wasn't a personal experience. It was a parody, but it still felt a little bit like I wasn't sure, like, should I write this? Is this like a confession of guilt? But
yeah, that's why the question.
There was something magical about that. I mean, people still talk about it to this day. I think the contrast, we're going from like having sex, jump over to you're in prison getting raped, back to having sex, back to prison, jumping back and forth. And just the mixture of all these different areas of life, like from dating someone who lied to you, or having sex with someone who lied, and then jumping over to like the law and the general, I mean, the more fundamental issue of like realizing something that you didn't know before, like open my eyes, yeah, like it was this big revelation. So there's something very poetic about that, but it's so vulgar at the same time. So yeah, there was something magical about that one. That one was just it was a home run. Yeah,
that song is very special.
Very special. Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I like that
It's
one.
like is we're fan of them, and then it became a song.
I love Ninja
Was
Turtles.
that
As
what?
you can see, I have the arcade cabinet behind me. So I think to me Ninja Turtles signifies a certain feeling in early childhood, like the image of the opening theme song or the movies. I have the poster of the first Ninja Turtle movie in another room. It's it's nostalgic, and it was one of the first earliest examples of a hero, of like people fighting for something, and but they're also funny, they're also having a fun doing it, they don't have to lose, they don't have to be cold and sacrificing. So there was something about it that I think spoke to me, and kind of that the song that's a parody of is Teenage Dirtbag, which is also a very relatable song to a lot of people. I mean, the feeling of rejection, not only rejection, but feeling like the fear to approach somebody that you find attractive, I think is very relatable to a lot of people, especially young people. So interesting that you would bring that up. It was maybe the first time I ever said I'm going to do a parody of a song from like 10 years ago, not just what's popular right now. At the time, I liked a girl, and she was, I took her out on a date, so I like had the courage to kind of make plans and all that. Um, and then she told me, like, we had plans to meet up again, but she told me, I'm starting to see somebody else, and I want to see where that goes. So, you're great, but I like this other guy better.
Maybe what was that like one of very popular songs? You have like this measurement, you kind of follow what is more popular, you try to go more trending, or it's just like natural?
It needs to be natural, just so like a song might be popular, but if it doesn't have like any potential for a parody, I can't force it. But like that song Teenage Dirtbag, it was the number one song for a while in the year 2000 or so. So it was popular, but today it's basically unknown by most people. But to me, it was on my mind. Like I listened to it because like some girl didn't want me, and then I wrote, this really good parody. I mean, it is a good song
It
parody
is,
in
it
that it
is.
refers to the original. A lot of my songs do this. It kind of follows the progression of the original song. So in the original song, the girl finally approaches the narrator. She approaches the guy and says, I got 2 tickets to Iron Maiden, baby. I'm a just teenage dirtbag baby like you.
I
And now,
love the
but now here
impersonations.
we've got Shredder telling the Ninja Turtles, I've got some bitches inside with weed and pizza. I'm just a teenage mutant ninja like you. It's like, I just love that. I love that feeling of like not only completing this my parody, but also kind of having such a great parallel to the original song. So that got me to write that, and then like either like the next day or the day before or at some point around then, I also like the What the Fox Says was on the radio. Like it was even a YouTube, one of the only YouTube songs, or one of the early YouTube hits that became a radio single as well. And I thought to myself, like, What the Black Says, even for me, that was really, really pushing the limit of like what's acceptable to say. Like, okay, there's a line between good craftsmanship, like good writing, versus just listing a bunch of curse words. So when I had that idea, What the Black Says, I was thinking like, well, is this a clever parody, or is it just is it just saying a bunch of racist stuff? So just to finish this story, I had this idea for What the Black Says, and I was like, I'm gonna do this, and this is gonna be like the best thing ever, and it was, and it blew up on YouTube, like in a way that I hadn't really done in a few years, and YouTube by 2013 was much bigger than it had been in 2008. So having a hit in 2013 meant something new. So this was kind of a comeback song for me at that time in 2013. There were people who were like, whatever happened to Rucka? Like, why hasn't he done anything big lately? I mean, I'd had some, I had some pretty big hits. I think the Obama song, Thrift Shop, the Obama stuff. I'd had, I was doing all right. But now What the Black Says came out, and it just blew up and really shook things up. And it was kind of a comeback record for me at the time. And again, like what I'm trying to, the reason I'm going into this is that it kind of started with me, liking a girl, asking her out, taking her out. She turns me down. I'm sad, so I'm listening to Teenage Dirtbag, and then I write a parody of that. That's not, I don't expect to blow up, but it's like my thing that I really want to create. And then there's what the fox says. I turn into what the black says, which is like me just like telling the world that I'm like going to do what I want to do and that this is going to be the best thing ever. So, you need to live, like you need to challenge yourself. You need to leave your comfort zone. This was when I was about 2 years sober. So going through a lot of trials, a lot of emotional challenges to adjust. I mean, just dealing with rejection without the aid of alcohol and without weed or anything like that was like a whole new thing. So I was dealing with something that a person should learn to deal with when they were maybe a teenager, but I was high every day as a teenager, so I never really quite got to learn these lessons. So you leave your comfort zone, you challenge yourself, you're willing to take a risk, you're willing to deal with some pain. It does lead to creativity ultimately. So that was certainly the case. I certainly make that connection whenever I think of what the black says. I think of me being in the state of mind where I'm thinking like, all right, fuck what anybody thinks. I know this should exist. And I'm going to show, I'll show her, I'll show that girl who didn't want me. I'll show everybody else that I'm not done. And I created this thing that it really is like a great parody of the original. Like it is like, how does the original go? Yeah. Sin goes, all the animal going through all the different animals, and I'm going through all the different cultures and races. It was well done, and I think it touched a lot of lives. I think a lot of people were impacted positively by that song.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In different ways, you definitely touch people, and that is awesome.
I have touched many people.
So hate speech, free speech, comedy, censorship that happens nowadays.
In a weird way, what I do isn't really seen as that offensive anymore. Like it used to, maybe, yeah, like racial stereotypes are not that offensive anymore. I mean, they are, but like no one really goes there. I think it's like smoking, used to be, there was a smoking section in every restaurant. And over time, smoking became a very rare thing. So I think joking about racial stereotypes, it's still a taboo. It's still kind of frowned upon, but hardly anyone does it. So it's not a big deal. But the PC police have set their target on others. They're setting their target on people who are just challenging them philosophically, people that are challenging, the whole social justice, intersectionality philosophy. So interestingly, people aren't quite sure what to do with me. I think it is people that are really just like earnestly trying to challenge the social justice warriors philosophically that are now being called racist and being called Nazis. Like when I was younger, like racial stereotypes were an enormous part of comedy, like popular stand-up comedy and comedy on TV, like not just South Park, but other shows on Adult Swim. Which is a channel we have in America. It's a lot of racial stereotypes and things like that were very, very big. It was a big part of comedy, and I was influenced by that. I loved it. I thought it was funny, and I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to do it bigger than it had ever been done. Today, it's become like, I think things changed a lot when Obama became president, because the opportunity to joke about race doesn't get bigger than that. Like having a black president, it just doesn't. Named Hussein, whose name rhymes with Osama, it doesn't get more opportune than that. But people really, really were revered by Obama. They like comedians and everyone else. They just thought he was untouchable.
Is there such a black privilege? People were afraid of criticizing him and be accused of being racist.
Definitely, from the start, people who loved Obama would label, Republicans as racist, or anyone as racist that was opposed to Obama. And Obama was saying things that should have made people concerned, saying we're going to fundamentally transform this country. I mean, that is I mean, for someone on the left to say that sounds like we're going to have a communist revolution. But I mean, so yeah, from the start that was a thing, and of course, some people didn't like Obama because he was black. But I mean, or we can. It was always there was always kind of a certain protection around him. The first famous person to criticize Obama openly was Donald Trump. He kind of tapped into what some people were thinking. He said Obama wasn't born in America, or he was speculating. So he's always been taking advantage of kind of a lot of unspoken sentiment among kind of the everyman, or not every, but like kind of the unheard, either minority or whatever they are. So he's always been a populist. There's always been that. Look, I mean, as far as is there black privilege, is there white privilege, I think the case can be made in either case. Like somebody could say that the war on drugs disproportionately affects black people, not just black people that do drugs or sell drugs, but just a black guy walking down the street could get pulled, stopped by the police and pushed around, and he didn't do anything to deserve that. Whereas somebody white walking down the street is not going to have that. And they both might be carrying drugs on them, but the black guy is going to get stopped for it, or whatever. I mean, the case can be made, but my whole approach to that is, look, I don't know. I can't tell you who's got it better. I can offer you my solution to all of it is that individualism. We need to embrace individualism on a philosophical level, and that needs to carry out into the political level, so that everyone is a person, everyone is an individual, and that is not what anyone is fighting for today. I mean, they kind of use the language of individualism when it suits them, but almost nobody is actually pushing for individualism, just that everybody is a person, everybody can and must think independently in order to live, everybody has inalienable rights, whether it's speech or property, and that's what makes life possible. This is something you cannot live without. So there's my solution. I can't tell you exactly what's happening out in the street. Is there black privilege? Is there white privilege? Is there all these privilege? I can only tell you, look, here's my solution. Here's what I'm offering is individualism, and that is possible. It is not. There's not this invisible force of collectivism. There's not some attachment to your in-group that people talk about. This is something they learn in college, either directly or indirectly through the media. I mean, this stuff all comes out of college. And like I mentioned earlier, philosophers in recent times, and really most philosophers, have not quite understood what consciousness is, how consciousness works, and what free will means. So these are questions that need to be answered. And that is what kind of allows us to approach all these other issues, understanding what a person is.
Yeah, it's really interesting. No, it's like kind of racial wars coming sometimes from the blacks talking about the white privilege and the races that they say that we cannot even understand that they encounter on the streets. And when it comes to the whites are racist, I try to do like the methodology of like trying to apply some epistemology on their method and try to turn it around, and it sometimes doesn't work, because there is some dissonance related there. It's like, oh yeah, I can understand how you have white privilege, because I'm saying that because I have had this conversation with some people accusing me from being white supremacist. It's like, I'm clearly not white to start. Like that is the funny thing. The funny part is that like me being attacked of being a white supremacist is like, clearly I'm not white to start, but yeah, I think it's interesting because sometimes it's like talking on the phone. So people like, oh, you can't understand because you're white. And I can understand you, and it's like, so we are in some type of a position that we're blind, and we don't have empathy or understand other people's position, but they are in that position that they see everything.
Look, I mean, all of these ideas have their root in the university. They all come from philosophy. So, like when did this whole issue of black anything like that. Blacks seeing themselves as part of a race and that this is an important part of their identity. Where did this come from? The blacks were trending, they were moving towards individualism a long time ago, before the 50s, before the 60s. And so was everyone else. They were moving towards individualism. And it was the intellectuals, both the black intellectuals in their communities, but also the white ones in the colleges, who told black people, you should think of yourself as part of this race. There's no such thing as independent thought. There's no such thing as individual rights that trump group rights. The philosophers rejected reason outright. You know, you hear them talk about postmodernism. That's what this was. Postmodernism says there is no reason, but also like most of the
possible.
But so when you can't think rationally, when you can't look at the world objectively, then what's left? The group. You just turn to the easiest thing, which is your group. So, I mean, these things do come from the philosophical roots. I mean, this does come from somewhere, but most people who are fighting against postmodernism, most people who are saying they're against postmodernism, what they're offering alternately is no better. They're offering just whatever was a little kind of popular before postmodernism, which is biological determinism, saying that you're shaped by your genes, which again leads you to racism, or it leads you to something other than individualism. Biological determinism, or they kind of try to blend nature and nurture, saying it's your environment that shapes you, or it's your genes, or it's a mixture of the two. But really, it's philosophy. It's the ideas and what you come to believe about what's true and how you should behave. What's the proper course of action that affects you both internally and your actions externally. So only objectivism, only Ayn Rand's philosophy solves this problem. And it's, in a weird way, in a sad sort of irony, she kind of delivers this philosophy basically at the time that all the intellectuals in America are pushing away reason in the most major way. Like, as postmodernism becomes like the new norm philosophically, Ayn Rand's objectivism is offered. Not that the previous generation probably would have accepted it either, but it's extra tragic that as Ayn Rand like solves all these philosophical problems, philosophy itself gets thrown in the trash, in the most major slam dunk.
What's your view on determinism?
There is none. I mean, we all have a biology for sure, but we also, as human beings, we are conscious, and you have a choice to focus or not. So that is what free will is. Free will doesn't mean you have options that you have no access to. So like if you tell me, like, to solve a math equation and I can't solve it, you say, oh, see, you don't have you're determined, like you don't have all the options in front of you. Within the options that you have in front of you. So look, everyone has a certain maybe capacity intellectually. Everyone has a certain genetic disposition. But as far as the choice to focus or not, that is completely up to the individual. It's something that, parents should teach their kids to do. A good education should and would teach a child to focus and to consider his options and then act according to that, and make decisions. But determinism is absolutely wrong to say that they're trying to be scientific. They're trying to say, oh, everything has a cause, so therefore a human decision has a cause as well. Yes, but the cause of a human decision is the conscious choice to focus.
It's a process of mind. Yeah.
And this is, by the way, they laugh at you if you say this in a university. They laugh at you in most universities, in most environments.
Yeah.
Usually the only people who still believe in free will are religious. So like they believe free will is a supernatural phenomenon. They're, Catholic or whatever. But Ayn Rand solves this problem. She says there is free will and it is scientific. There is evidence of it. It's one of the first things that are evident to you. Existence is evident, and your own consciousness. Everything you observe beyond that contains within it these two axioms: existence and consciousness. And your consciousness, if you introspect, if you acknowledge your own consciousness, you see very easily that you have the choice to focus. Like right now, I can look at you, or I can just look away, start to drift away. I can start to just start to ignore what's happening, or I can focus maybe on the color of your shirt. I can focus on the color of the wall behind you. So I can choose what to focus on. I can continue to think about what I'm going to say next, or I can just completely shut my mind off and just start either change the topic or just completely start to hum a tune in my head. So that choice to focus is free will.
So there is the objectivism in your individualism and your thoughts, on a way of like, if I ask you which ice cream you would like to have, and you still gonna have a very determined options because of the things that you could not choose anything out of what you know.
So that's not really determinism. I mean, they use that as a trick to say, oh, see, like you can't name something you've never heard of, and you can't like. So basically, they're holding omniscience as the standard. This is how the religious mentality is still prevalent in our culture, even though we're mostly a scientific-minded culture in the West. But we still look at philosophical questions as though God exists. So either you know everything at once from all possible angles, you're omniscient, you're God, or you're completely determined. No, the choices are in front of you. The choices that you know of. The choices that you're able to contemplate are what you have to choose from. But the decision that you make is a decision. You can focus and consider it and choose it. But what they're trying to say is, or what determinism says is that the decision that you make was predetermined based on everything that happened to you up until you like. But that's just not true. No matter what happened to you, you can still stop and focus. So look, people are going to have a different menu presented to them, a different plethora of options at any given time and place in history, or at their level of intelligence, or whatever it is. There's going to be a finite amount of options, but having a set amount of finite options is not determinism. And again, they're using omniscience as the standard. So keep an eye out for that. And this is modern philosophy. The more I learn about this, the more it makes sense to me that philosophers in the Enlightenment, and certainly after the Enlightenment, since then, they say they hold omniscience as the standard, and they're really doing the same thing with omnipotence, right? Like you're saying you can't know everything and then choose from all these different things. You can't do everything at once, so therefore you're determined. That's just not true. As a human being, you're only approaching these questions as a human being. You have a certain nature, you have a certain identity, a certain type of consciousness, certain sense organs that interact with the world. You have a certain finite nature. So the only reason to consider these questions are from the standpoint of a human being in this reality on this planet. And now you say, okay, I have the choice to focus, so I have free will. I'm going to use it. That is not, there's no determinism in there.
Cool. Religiosity. Are you an atheist?
Yeah.
You call yourself an atheist, agnostic, and
not agnostic for sure.
Oh.
So I don't. Yeah, people. So I mean, remember I said how modern thinkers, they hold omniscience as the standard. So even Sam Harris, he says, I'm almost certain that there's no God. I'm almost certain. So even though he's an atheist, he can't quite bring himself, like he needs to be an agnostic atheist. But no, if something is, first of all, if it's arbitrary, so there's no evidence of it, there's no reason to entertain this, but someone just proposed there's a God, you can throw it away. You don't even need to acknowledge it. So it's arbitrary. You don't even give it the time of day rationally. And then if something is contradictory, so the idea of God is contradictory. It contradicts itself because everything has a nature, everything has an identity. And this God is not limited by his own identity. He's supernatural. He's not confined by his own nature. So God cannot exist. So I wouldn't say I'm agnostic. I would say there is no God for a number of reasons, and I just hit on two of them. But I understand the role that God plays in lives of people. Mainly, God the idea of God offers an integrating factor. an integrating factor. People need to tie everything together. They need their actions to have some sort of central purpose, and they need their belief to be in some sort of system. We're not just infants just going from, just reacting to sensations. We do need to think. And then the idea of God, it kind of says, okay, everything is because of God. Everything is because of God. And then what you should do is what God says, or something like that. So I see the purpose that it plays. And I've gone into this topic on my commentary channel in a series called How to Live Sober, where I've helped people by using my own experience reconcile the 12-step program with objectivism, and showing how, just as the Enlightenment thinker, like the Age of Reason thinkers, like the founding fathers of America, a lot of them believed in God, but that was not what makes them stand out. What makes them stand out was their respect for nature, with their respect for the individual's capacity to think and to judge, and his necessity to live by his own judgment. That's what makes them stand out. To them, God was just kind of how they tied it all together. And I think the same is true with Aristotle to a certain degree. My understanding is Aristotle also had a prime mover. Like when he was out of options, like when he was out of answers, he just said, there's a prime mover tying it all together, causing everything, I suppose. So too, today, to a person who is trying to stay sober, the 12-step program says, pick a higher power. And what that really means is, I think, kind of pick something to put everything into this category, everything under this umbrella. And objectivism kind of offers that in a more consistent way, in a way that allows you not only to have a so-called higher power, which is reality, but also gives you a moral code and a fully consistent epistemology that allows you to really, really flourish to the maximum potential. So whenever anyone asks me about God, I want to go into that I'm not dismissive of the idea like it's just some fairy tale that someone came up with. I mean, it is, but the reason it's important to people is because it offers people spirituality. It offers people a role for their consciousness to play in life. Because the alternative to religion should not be just materialism. It should not just be to reject consciousness altogether. It is evident that we are conscious as individuals. Yeah. First of all, if it's arbitrary, so there's no evidence of it, there's no reason to entertain this, but someone just proposed there's a God, you can throw it away. You don't even need to acknowledge it. So it's arbitrary. You don't even give it the time of day rationally. And then if something is contradictory, so the idea of God is contradictory. It contradicts itself because everything has a nature, everything has an identity. And this God is not limited by his own identity. He's supernatural. He's not confined by his own nature. So God cannot exist. So I wouldn't say I'm agnostic. I would say there is no God for a number of reasons, and I just hit on two of them. But I understand the role that God plays in lives of people, and objectivism kind of offers that in a more consistent way, in a way that allows you not only to have a so-called higher power, which is reality, but also gives you a moral code and a fully consistent epistemology that allows you to really, really flourish to the maximum potential. So whenever anyone asks me about God, I want to go into that I'm not dismissive of the idea like it's just some fairy tale that someone came up with. I mean, it is, but the reason it's important to people is because it offers people spirituality. It offers people a role for their consciousness to play in life. Because the alternative to religion should not be just materialism. It should not just be to reject consciousness altogether. It is evident that we are conscious as individuals. Yeah. So a lot of people are raised without religion, but they end up discovering it. They end up finding, oh God, oh wow, this is makes my life so meaningful. Especially if someone, struggles with something like addiction, and then they discover something like Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, oh God, yes, God is the answer. So it is. So most atheists today, most atheist upbringing, so to speak, modern Western culture, they've rejected religion, but they've rejected kind of what's good about religion, if you will. Like they've rejected that integrating factor. So the average person raised an atheist, their parents tell him like, there's no God, but be a good person anyway. But what does that even mean? Good by what standard? There's no God, but there's still sort of meaning if you decide what meaning is. Like they offer like subjectivity. You decide what has meaning, and you decide what's moral. But the correct answer is the objectivist, I think, answer is there is no God, just like there's no other supernatural entity, but there is a rational way to look at the world. You need to observe and then integrate, conceptualize by a proper method that is consistent with reality. And then as far as what you should do, and as far as how to pursue meaning in life, there is a rational standard. So it is objective. It is a proper connection between your consciousness and existence, where you're observing and you're playing by reality's rules, and you're taking action in order to preserve your life and to better your life. So, I think that sort of speaks to what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, a lot. So most people who are raised atheists, so to speak, they're still kind of being deprived of something. So yeah, there is religious indoctrination, which definitely, I think, ruins lives. It prevents people. I know what it takes to overcome a religious upbringing, and if someone as fiercely rebellious as me will tell you it's very difficult. What does that say about the capacity of most people? I'm not saying capacity, because everyone, I think, is capable of, but the likelihood of most people really questioning a religious indoctrination. It's very bad. I'm not pro-religion. But the alternative that's typically been offered in modern times is this materialism. Like I said, this worldview that rejects the role of consciousness and that rejects the need for integration. That doesn't say everything ties to everything else. That doesn't say look at reality and pursue objective values, pursue rational values in order to live. There's this age-old dichotomy between the mind and the body. You see it most clearly, or in one of the most clearest ways, with religion versus materialism. Materialism saying you're just a body. Forget consciousness. That's just your body tricking you. You're just a body with no consciousness. And on the flip side, you've got religion saying, oh, your consciousness is the only special holy thing. That's your soul. Forget your body. Your body is animalistic and cheap and finite. The fact that it's finite, the fact that life is finite, they say, means that it doesn't really have any meaning. The opposite is true. The fact that your life is finite makes it valuable.
The atheism is of not giving you this fake idea, this empty illusion of the afterlife, the second chance, because you need to make it worth right now. It gives more value to life. It gives the real meaning to life. And the objectivism, I agree with you that it gives the power of us to make the most reasonable option. We're gonna take it because it would be like in between the options. I've seen you talking to Sargon about that, and he's like, he refuses objectivism because of the selfishness, and he's like, it's just because of the expression of being selfishness, of being selfish. And I actually see that as a trait that was evolutively acquired, because it's like, of course we're going to do the best to the equal. That is kind of like all the other species got that naturally. It's like a natural selected trait, to be good to the equals, to the same species as you. That's a way of growing, getting better, and being able to procreate and pass to the next generation. And I don't see any problem philosophically on the objective, and I actually think it's the best way of thinking because of that. Because yes, I'm not going to do bad to the ones that are equal. I will always try to interact in a good way, or not interact, like you said. Try to not have the negative interaction and try to push to the best. So I think that is kind of natural. That's why we see animals helping each other, even if it's like, they are not reasonable like our species, as a human species, but we still see them cooperating. And I think the cooperation is that natural selected trait.
Yeah, I mean, so animals, they're not they make very primitive decisions or they make no decisions at all. Now, as
Yes.
human beings, we have concepts and we have the concept of morality, like what is the right course of action. So of course it's come to mean to most people morality means detached from practicality. It has nothing to do with there's the practical and there's the moral. But of course the two must be the same. They need to be the same in order to live. And that's something that Rand solves. I mean, the question of like why Sargon, can't entertain objectivism.
You
Yeah,
have to try to talk to him
it was
about.
it was an exciting thing. Like the first time I ever spoke about objectivism in public was with him on his Thinkery channel. My understanding of objectivism back then, I think, was a lot more, elementary than it is now. I'm still learning as I go.
Mhm.
But he thought at the time he's basically on board. He read a book called The Ominous Parallels, which is written by an objectivist, an amazing book. And he read it and thought like, oh yeah, this all makes sense. So he didn't. I think his whole point to me was like, okay, I'm not sure I entirely agree with objectivism, but I mean, I'm enough on board. But I think a little after that, as he started speaking in such language, saying that ideas are the motor of history. That's the big thesis of that book, saying that philosophy is what shapes a culture, not genetics, not events, but philosophy ultimately influences how a person interprets what's taking place. Um, and people would start kind of making fun of that and kind of being dismissive of that. And he chose Jonathan Haidt as his cop out. He told me, oh no, Jonathan Haidt wrote a book that says you act first and then you rationalize it. That's what he told me. So it was an exciting thing at the time for me to talk about this. I had this kind of view of people like Sargon and Rubin and all these guys like, oh, these guys are really looking for a new way. So I kind of wanted to get that conversation going, um, which was a bit of an interesting thing to see. I've graduated from there now. Now I really just look at most objectivists, and I think they're the ones who need to wake up. I think a lot of them, they don't really take they're too enamored by mainstream intellectuals. Like they're too appeasing, and they think they need validation and approval from people like Peterson and Harris. I think if Ayn Rand were alive, she would just be dismissing people like Sam Harris right out of the bag. And she was, so she used to talk about how like religion has monopolized exaltation and spirituality, like the meaning in life, that religion has monopolized that, and that it should not be just given to religion, that rational people should take these things back. And
Mhm.
I mean, hearing you talk about atheism, I'm thinking like, yeah, like atheism should also be taken from the skeptics. It should be taken away from people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins. So that too, like it's come to mean something in its popular usage of this materialistic view of things, this subjectivity, as though everyone just creates their own meaning. I mean,
You think it's a little bit of like the agnosticism fault on like because I don't know and I cannot prove the negative, there is no God. I have to keep away from like yeah, it would be possible,
it
and
is.
that is when open all this field, all this chance for the postmodernism, everything is possible, and all this subjectivism.
Mm-hmm. It is skepticism that ultimately gave us all these things. David Hume, in my understanding, he said that you can't have principles. You can perceive what's happening, but you can't make a generalization and say that the sun is going to set tomorrow the way that it's going to rise tomorrow the way it rose today. So that skepticism kind of again holds omniscience as the standard. It says unless you're God, you can't you
No.
know you can't know anything really, because how do you know? So even the atheists, they're still agnostic about the fact that there's no God, and they're agnostic about everything. So um So now we're in a state of the world where religious people have the most conviction. They're speaking about morality in the clearest terms. Religious people and socialists who use similar moral language, saying the poor deserve to be treated, to be given stuff, and the rich deserve to have their property taken from them. They're speaking the language of morality. And the skeptics, the centrists, the moderates, they're the ones saying like, hey man, everything's subjective. How do you know? Don't tell me one thing is right and the other's wrong. Don't even tell me what's true. How do you really know? So who's going to win that debate when some people are certain and the other side is completely unsure and doubtful? Obviously the certain side, the one that with certainty, is going to win.
So you would say like you were more like atheist, like a Hitchens follower, like more on like there is no God and not like I don't believe. You would win on more on the side there is no God.
Yeah, but a lot more radical than Hitchens. I mean, other than his atheism, what does he really say that's philosophically? Well, I mean, what does he say that's philosophically profound? Nothing really, not very much. I mean, he was a socialist. He supported George W. Bush's ridiculous foreign policy. He was not an integrated person, like most people are not. So I would take that same approach that he uses with logic, saying that there's no God because it's an arbitrary assertion, which I'm assuming is what he said. There is no God. And I would apply it to everything else, apply it to the most basic level of philosophy, all the way up to the top of the political and aesthetic branches of philosophy, and just say, look, there is an objective standard to everything. There's a proper way to look at things, and that is by observing reality and conceptualizing the material that we observe. So yeah, I thought you were comparing me to Hitchens, saying like, I don't remember what I thought you were saying, but yeah, I mean, he was definitely a child of the skeptic upbringing, as most people are, most mainstream intellectuals and most people. So even though maybe he was great on the issue of atheism and he was great on some other concrete issues, I know he was very big in exposing Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and all these things. But I mean, philosophically, he was as mainstream as it gets. So people like him, maybe Richard Dawkins was also a big atheist. But what does Richard Dawkins have to say beyond the God question, or even on the God question? He's not an atheist for the correct reasons. So I mean, to me, there's the right answer, and then there's everything else. So I try to focus more on like, what is the truth? Like, what does objectivism have to say, so I can understand that. And that helps me make sense of what I'm hearing from other people.
I've seen you talking about supporting people that not philosophically match to you. That's like, stop supporting Ben Shapiro. Is there anybody that you watch and you follow and you kind of agree?
Yeah, well, I would say Ayn Rand and some of the older objectivists. Some of them are no longer alive, but definitely the oldest generation, the people who studied directly with Ayn Rand, they were certain, and they would speak with clarity and in essentials, they would get right to the point. And if they were to come across someone like Ben Shapiro, I'm not saying be mean or rude, but get to the point. Say, okay, here's what Shapiro is saying, and here's why it's wrong. And here's what I do like about Shapiro, and here's why he might be better than the postmodernists, but in a certain respect, he's the worst because he's claiming a monopoly on morality and he's claiming a monopoly on free will and things like that. So the question of how to treat people and how to judge people and how to evaluate people is a deep question. It's a tough one in the world that we find ourselves in today. But I was in that video, I was really kind of fed up with objectivists who, it's like they've got the answer, but they're sucking up to the mainstream, like it seems to me. And I know that it's a bit of maybe I was in a bit of a mood that day. I had just listened to Ayn Rand.
No, it's a good video. Well, I actually wanted to ask you, is that going to happen one day? That talk to Shapiro?
Well, him and Yaron Brook, that I mean, I don't know, with me, or what do you mean? Oh, I would love to, but look, but ultimately, I want a philosopher to talk to him. I want an objectivist philosopher, someone like Harry Binswanger, who's still an active working philosopher of objectivism. He, like someone like him on a stage with Ben Shapiro. Leonard Peikoff, he's very much retired now, so it's probably not going to happen, but he's somebody who would get right to the point with Shapiro. We don't really need someone like me to talk to Shapiro. I mean, it would be entertaining, but really, like, we need philosophers. I want to see philosophers like the old school. Like when I did that video on Shapiro, I had just listened to Ayn Rand's, I think her final lecture at the Ford Hall Forum, which was a series she did annually for I think 17 or 18 years. And so it was titled The Age of Mediocrity. Check this out. So good. And, you know, people talk about Ronald Reagan like, oh, he was a good free market guy. He was good on. She spoke about him like he was the biggest disappointment, not even disappointment, the biggest waste of time in the first place. The fact that he was using religion for his political convictions, and it's just such a good lecture. The way she spoke about religious people and the opposition to religion in America by these scientists who saw no relationship between science and ethics, like how they should behave. She described a televised debate between two scientists and two Christians, and the Christian people were pronouncing moral judgments with clarity and conviction, and the scientists were responding, oh, you don't think we're moral? Why don't you think we're moral? Like begging them for validation. Rand was like mocking them with her voice. She was saying like, oh, you don't, I can't do her accent right now, but she's like, oh, you don't think we're moral? Why don't you think we're moral? She was just looking at both sides and just describing how pathetic the landscape had gotten. I mean, not everyone needs to be angry. Not everyone needs to speak with that same kind of, I guess, level of anger or whatever it is. I mean, there's maybe like when I speak, I tend to go maybe the more humorous route a lot of the time. So I'm not saying someone like Ben Shapiro should be yelled at and called a coward and called all these things. But if you have the truth, just say it, and just say it clearly, get right to the point, and speak with the innocence of a child. I think that's something that Ayn Rand kind of brought that is unusual. She approached things with this fresh set of eyes. She took nothing for granted, and that's what I want to see people doing. I want to see a certain excitement, like, oh no, but let's talk about this. Here's the issue that we need to get to the bottom of. So
would you say that like with Shapiro, the biggest issue would be like the subjectivism, like not accepting objectivism, like the way of, he always talk about how we need kind of like some moral religious standard or some type of morality. Is that the thing?
Yes. Well, so he would say, oh no, this is not subjective. This is objective because it's coming from God. But yeah. But what does that mean?
It doesn't accept the subjective of religious.
It's saying whatever God decides, it's God's subjective whim. Or if he says, oh no, it's still objective. It's just that God has access to this, like that God is reporting to us. Oh, so God doesn't decide what's moral anymore. So there is an objective standard. So we can just cut out the middleman. We can just look right at reality and say, what are the facts, and then what do the facts imply about values? What does the what does the is imply about the ought? Yeah, I mean, he would say he's not he's saying the truth and morality is intrinsic in reality, but that God is the source of that. And then what's typically the answer to people like Ben Shapiro? It's this skepticism. It's saying, oh, no, don't be so certain there's a God. There's really no evidence of that. There's really no evidence of anything. So just follow what you think right now, but you can't even really be sure of that. It ultimately eats itself, and it does turn into nihilism. And ultimately, you see these atheists turning back to religion, really. It all kind of comes full circle, and you see the popularity of people like Jordan Peterson. He's kind of bringing religion back into the intellectual kind of respected position that it maybe had a very long time ago. Like
reasonable atheists would not be dragged back into religion with his arguments, is what I would say.
But it's bigger, it's deeper than arguments. Ultimately, what inspires people is meaning. What inspires people are stories. And he's saying, look, there's these stories that have been with us for thousands of years. And Peterson is saying these stories from the Bible are innate. They're in us. Evolution gave them to us because they work. And since he says, you can't really access reality objectively because, like every other modern thinker, he doesn't think reason works entirely well. So he says we need to turn to these stories that are innate. We need to turn to religion, and that gives us some guidance for how to behave. So yeah, his religious side is obviously irrational, but he blends it with pseudoscience, like this biological determinism, this evolutionary psychology, which I think is a largely misunderstanding of evolution that people use. And then his kind of purely secular side, I guess, is pragmatism. He subscribed to just mainstream pragmatism, which sounds like a good thing. Yeah, pragmatism, just do what works. Yeah. But hold on. If you don't think that an individual can independently observe reality and form generalizations about what he observes, and then form principles for what to follow, if you don't think that those principles have any basis in the facts, so what's left? Just do what seems right now? What makes it seem right? Feelings, of course. Pragmatism says, follow your emotions. Just start acting. Just see what your body does. Just see where your feelings drive you. So it's emotionalism. So we've got religion on one side under the guise of science and objectivity, and then on the other side you've got this emotionalism saying, just do what seems to work right now.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And it became a big pseudoscience. Actually, that is a little bit what leads a lot of people on the movement that I have talked about, on no-fap movement. Have you heard, you have any position about?
There's a lot to say. This is an important part of life, of course. Anecdotes can be, what else do you have, right? But observation. So again, observation is not the same as subjectivity. If someone found that stopping to masturbate has helped them focus on more long-term goals, including finding a sex partner, aka a romantic partner, there's definitely something there. I think I found that my most productive times of growth, my most passionate kind of streaks, I think were at a time when I was laying off the fapping. So I might surprise you if I say I'm sympathetic to the no-fap philosophy. I don't know if they're saying it for all the right reasons, but there's something in there that I think is positive. There probably also is a difference between male and female masturbation. When a man masturbates, it takes something a bit out of him that he could probably use, like well, look, you know how a woman can have multiple orgasms at once or in a row, or she still enjoys sex after she orgasms. So that's quite different from a man. A man, he comes and he's ready to go to sleep. So a man who's masturbating at...
It's nice to say that, because there are a lot of young people that think that feeling, it's something unnatural and it's something that is taking some vitamins or energy. And no, the girls feel the same. You know, to have the orgasm, it's a natural feeling of feeling like relaxed and sleepy after, because that is one of the things. Okay, see how that consumes your body. You know, like the people that want to indoctrinate for other reasons on like how fapping is bad, use that as an argument to show how masturbation is negative for your body. You know, and that's where I'm like trying to talk against those things, because it comes a lot of from, it's very like on the conservative religious view of the masturbation. It's like, oh, you know that if you fap, you're gonna have hair growing in your hand. And then they bring other arguments that are like, no, this is like the natural thing of way of feeling, and use this as negative. One of the things that I actually talked about is like, because what I believe on the no fap movement is like, you put men into this mode of like, you're not gonna fap. You used to fap every day. Even if you do it every day, you're gonna like, okay, I'm not gonna do that. You're gonna have to replace that time with some other activity. I see a lot of guys saying like they're going to the gym, and that brings a lot of struggle into your living, like your routine. So normally people that are going to the gym, they eat better, they sleep better, they drink more liquids. Those factors, this replacement of habits will increase your testosterone, will increase your well-being in general, and there is nothing related to keeping to seminal retention or to like not fapping. Like you could do all the things and keep fapping and feel better. And it's not the fapping that was negative for your life at first.
Yeah, I think when people say it's unnatural, I think they're falling into this trap again, where either we're material beings with no consciousness, or we're conscious beings with whose body is disgusting. But I mean, what they're doing here, it sounds like they're like, okay, so what is masturbation if we were to analyze it? A person, a human being, is thinking about something that's not actually happening at the moment. They're not having sex with someone. They're thinking about sex, and that's arousing them. And they're touching themselves, but they're thinking about, other things. It's clearly conceptual. You're clearly using things that you've abstracted from reality. And that is a human activity, of course. This is very human. It is very natural. It is just as it is natural to develop technology. It is natural to write lyrics or music or whatever it is, or to paint a picture. It is human and natural to fantasize and to think about things that are arousing and to masturbate. So I do think that masturbation is natural. I do think it is an important part of life. The place where I might start to overlap with the no-fap movement is where they might make some valid points, like saying like people who do it constantly, it's hindering their development.
So yeah, one of the things that I'm planning on, coming back to subject, I'm actually talking about this here without having given them the answer, but I'm working on studying, like reading a lot of studies, and want to produce at first a video uh, to instead of a straw man, to Iron Man their position. So because there are people that could get benefit from the abstinence of masturbation, and try to delimitate, try to explain who are these people that could have benefits from it and how to do it in a more reasonable way. And so I'm gonna do as much as I can, and it start becoming like a challenge on like how is gonna win. Oh, I'm 138 days. Okay, there's no point of doing for more than 7 days by the studies that I've read, that support the claim, that back this claim up, suggest like a 6-7 days abstinence, and not like this challenge that is being trending viral online, that is like a lot of guys just posting like, oh, I'm 100 days, I'm 200 days, I'm 300 days, because there is no point of doing for that long, in the way that you said, like rationalizing of what is the masturbation is, yes, it's something that you like just fantasizing, and you have something real because you're touching yourself, you're gonna ejaculate, you're gonna have all these feelings. But in the other way, it's like there are other species that do masturbate, and when I see that in biology as like in the nature, I actually see it as something. It's the masturbation is a tool for you to get on the urge. You would be like, you're like in a sexual need, or in a sexual urge, and you cannot get access to your partner or to someone at that time. So it would be like a snack. It's what I play with my friends when I talk about this. Like, it's like a snack. You're not gonna survive out of snacks. You need to eat the main meals. You need to go through breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But when you're in between then, and you cannot access that meal, you don't need to be starving anyways. You don't need to feel that need and not have access, because you can fulfill yourself like in another way. So that would be, and that is something like that if you use with moderation, like we said, because even drinking water, eating candy, whatever natural things become addictive, and you can use in addictive negative ways. But that is the limit that you should keep to be healthy. So it's like there are studies that show negative results of masturbation if you're doing it exclusively. So if you have a partner, and you like, I can't see her during the week, and you want to masturbate, there is no problem if you're going to see her in the end of the week. But if you do not have a girlfriend, or or whatever, yeah, you should not just do it all the time, and and be fine with that, because you do need to go for the hunt. You need to go find your girlfriend and do both. That is the healthy way. So yeah, there is a lot of to talk about, and
Mhm.
I understand, like, most of people would, like, in that analysis of like their personal experiences, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, I could be using that for that time for a better thing, and then they end up thinking that thing is bad or negative. But you see, like, as I really want to stand on the point, like, no, there is nothing bad if you use it properly.
Yeah, the way I would say it's more than a snack. Like it's an important part of development, and if you're introspective, if you're thinking as you're going, like what is this that arouses me about this? What does it say about me and my values? I think it's a type of introspective process that you
It
can't
is
get anywhere
important.
else. So yeah, I think what people are getting at when they say, when they're counting the days and they're kind of supporting one another's journey is, again, it's kind of like with the 12-step program with alcoholism. It can be turned into an unhealthy thing if people kind of misunderstand what they're trying to do. There's something there where people are trying to find some integrated purpose, where this
Yeah.
has become like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I may be making mistakes today. There's a lot I don't know, but one thing I know I'm doing right is that I'm not masturbating constantly the way that I did in the past. So it gives them something to kind of hold as their purpose, and kind of like
Mhm.
their a value. But no, I mean, yeah, moderation is definitely the way. I think pornography is probably an interesting sort of additional thing
Yeah, there
to,
is
to
a lot
debate.
of it meshes, and it kind of a
Mm,
mix a little bit the conversation with the pornography. I have watched and studied a lot about it, because there are a lot of studies and a lot of statistics coming out of this. It's like violence related to pornography. I've checked on some on South America, and they go totally against what the claims try
yeah.
to say. They try to say that people that consume pornography are more violent, and it's not true.
Hmm.
Interesting enough, is like the people that do not consume pornography are more violent partners.
Yeah.
This is
I
some uh, in South America, it's more related to religiosity. Like, apparently the most of cases of, like, uh, domestic violence is from evangelical people.
hmm
And it's interesting, because one of the studies that I've read about the pornography was, like, related to, like, this thing on, like, what people like and what people will look for, because some people try to say, like, oh, pornography is addictive and will bring you in a level, like, you're gonna consume this type, and you're gonna degenerate to consume violent pornography or weird pornography. And it's pretty not. There is such a pattern
hmm
study in lab by a Canadian doctor that was about what people look for and what really arouse people. And they found out that men are very much strict on their tastes. They really know what they like, and they do not get aroused by the things that they are not interested. So you can put a man sitting there and play all the types of pornography, even the worst ones, and they will not get aroused by. If they say, like, they are heterosexual, they will only get aroused by girls. And if they say they are homosexual, they will only get aroused by men. It's really interesting in the other way that girls get aroused by pretty much everything.
Can I chime in? I think whenever you talk about these studies, I'm skeptical of these
Yeah,
studies because, like I mentioned earlier, psychology is such a young science, and
yeah,
it's been corrupted from the start. So the people conducting these studies, they're not introspecting. They're not asking themselves what is the role of sex in my life. No, they're just looking at the patient as though he's a lab rat, and documenting his behavior. So they don't understand the role of consciousness, and they're not they're not factoring in, they're not controlling for what the patient believes. Again, philosophy is the missing piece of the puzzle. So you mentioned a study earlier in our conversation. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly, but I tend to take those studies and throw them
Oh
in the
yeah, no,
trash.
I understand that you
Hmm.
kind of try to argue with the methodology, and like
Hmm.
I would like to know sometimes. Yeah, is what I try to do. I try to go more through the methodology. Uh, I understand that you're very skeptical about the things that are subjective. This was not that subjective study, because I know they put the electrodes on the penises and vaginas, so there was a little bit on like the impulse and
No, 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 no. This I agree mainly from my own introspection and from people
yeah.
I've known is that yes, men tend
Okay.
to know what we're attracted to, and
There is
women are a little more fluid. But the part where I throw the studies I throw in the trash are trying to relate pornography to violence. Whether it's
oh yes, yes,
whether
yes.
so
No,
things
sorry.
like that I think are very superficial studies. It's not real science because real science needs to factor in everything. So you've got these people in South America with a long history of Catholicism, so their whole worldview is warped by that, and influences of Marxism and all these other philosophical beliefs, and the nativism, this sort of kind of barbaric attitude, which has some good things about it, by the way, a
Hmm.
certain
Yeah.
innocence and love of nature, but like love of self and in a certain respect. And now we're suddenly looking at a guy who beats his wife and asking, well, was he looking at pornography? There's so much there to unpack. So that's
I
why
see, I see.
I tend to
Yeah,
kind of
no, but
just
more that like on the data, like it's more on the. It's not a prospective study; it's a retrospective study. So they take like the datas and they just put like, yeah, we asked for using pornography and being religious on the cases of aggressors. So they took like aggressors as
yeah.
the universe and asked them questions about these two things. So it's more like a retrospective. They already got people like, yeah, they are deleting everybody that was not caught, for example, because it could have like a bunch of people that are not even religious and that do consume pornography that were not caught by the study because they were not even caught by the police as a violent aggressor.
Yeah, and well,
Like,
so
yeah, no, I
my
understand.
and there's so much that goes into what makes a person violent. There's so much that goes into it, and in the modern
Yeah, the
world,
other factors that bring the person to be that violent as
but
well. Yeah.
the main one being philosophy, and most philosophy is implicit. So people they don't even realize they've been influenced by these ideas. So in the modern world, the scientific approach doesn't look at philosophy as an important factor. In the modern world, a scientist studying humans just looks at if a person is being violent and goes, what are the conditions that caused him to be violent? I don't know, maybe the fact that he doesn't have a coherent worldview. He's a human being that has the mentality of a monkey. Like he doesn't like he has all these urges and all these mixed messages and then guilt from religion on top of that and guilt from the other philosophical influences on top of that, and he doesn't know what to do with himself, and he gets some relief from pornography because it gives him something kind of based in reality, but it of course adds other connotations about sex and about pleasure in general. He's been taught that pleasure is either sinful or pleasure is amoral at best. It has no relationship to morality. So there's so much that goes into what makes a
Yeah.
person violent or what makes a person the way they are in general. So it's very superficial and at all, I think, to just look at something as advanced as a person being violent and trying to relate it to like certain environmental factors such as like were they intaking exposure to pornography, or were they intaking marijuana, were they were it's we need to go deeper. Then that's why I always like to focus on what is true, like what is the proper philosophy for living on earth, and then it helps you really understand kind of that gives you the tools to understand the role of sex in a rational life, and you might then also evaluate porn and ask, well, what is the role of porn, if any, in a rational life? Would people want to produce porn
But I think like, is that porn not just another type of imagery that came with the video?
No.
Because like we had like other things before. No, like we still had like I don't know, like we had the letters, we had like all the magazines, we had the imagery books that would portray the kind of like pornography before we had the video, you know, like.
Look, we had, I mean, we had the ability to draw naked people having sex for a very long time. But Thomas Jefferson and George Washington weren't sending each other, animated porn. They were writing each other long letters about, I don't know if Washington was involved in this conversation, but the people in the Age of Reason, they had a certain view of
the Playboy letters.
The nature of. Well, okay, so something happened. It's not that technology made us. We've gotten much more into porn since the 1960s or so. So our technology has not advanced significantly before that and since then. Hugh Hefner did not invent, the camera. Or Larry Flint is probably a better example of the values of a culture being reflected. He created Hustler. So to him, nudity and a little bit of sexual action wasn't enough. To him, he wanted to see strap-ons and chicks with dicks and all types of leather outfits and goat play. I think the degree to which people indulge in porn.
BDSM.
Yeah, BDSM. I think the degree to which people engage in porn and the type of porn that they're into, it sort of reflects their values, and it's very difficult to untangle. This is not a simple equation, like if you're aroused by this, you believe this. No, it's much more complicated, but the relationship of people to pornography and therefore of a culture, the role of porn in a culture, it says something about the philosophy of the culture. So our attitude towards sex, I think, has gotten a lot more materialistic in modern times than maybe it was a long time ago. So it's not just that technology has made porn more abundant. It's that if everyone was like me, there'd be a lot fewer people being willing to star in a pornographic video. A lot fewer people would be willing to expose themselves and to have sex with a stranger and to distribute it to everyone. So it's a tough question. I mean, it's an interesting question. Like, what if the future goes the way that I want it to? If objectivism is embraced by the intellectuals and the culture comes to reflect that, and there's this new age of reason, how would people look at sex, both having sex and as well as using technology to show sex in the media? It's an interesting question. I don't have all the answers, but. All roads do lead to philosophy, and all things involving sex do ultimately.
Do you think we are doing okay the way that we're doing right now? Like pretty much free? Like the way that the porn goes around?
I think we're way too promiscuous. I think the attitude towards sex is so materialistic. So a girl getting covered by 10 dicks at a time is. I mean, who wins in that? I mean, obviously, these are consenting adults. So politically.
Like what we defend as way of like it's freedom. If they are willing to do that, and there is people that are paying them from doing that want to consume their art. I'm fine with that.
Well, politically, I'm fine with it, but I can still judge as a person with my own values. So I mean, I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be one of 9 people ejaculating on this poor girl on camera for everybody. I wouldn't want to be that. There's a reason I wouldn't want to be that. It's because sex is important and the body is important, and not just anyone gets to see me ejaculate. So it's look, any discussion of sex ultimately does lead to values.
Not many people talk about that. I think Jordan Peterson tried to talk a little bit like about that, but then he kind of goes on the religion and morality instead of going like the sexual value of individuals. Because some guys is stating on Facebook that if it's a girl is successful, it's because she opened her legs more times than the other one.
Of course,
Or
that's an
something.
exaggeration.
No, but
That's only true most of the time. I'm joking. But so look, whether it's Jordan Peterson or the NoFap movement, I mean, there is a reason people are being drawn to this attitude, because the way sex has come to be treated, is that it's just this materialistic exchange of fluids. And here comes the religious guy or the NoFap crowd saying, no, you should have more respect than that for sex. So there's a lot that they're wrong about. There's a lot that Peterson is wrong about. He has this duty-based view of life, and he is not saying what Ayn Rand was saying, which is that sex is so good, it's so special, and such an important part of life that it should be you should be selective
yeah,
with it.
yes, yes.
He's not exactly saying that. He's kind of taking he's using some of that language to say something very different. So yeah, but again, there
But
is a reason people are drawn to these things. So I think we should look at what is it about these movements and these thinkers that people are drawn to.
But I think this is an important conversation because of we are in this war of freedom, mainly with the LGBTQ community pushing in the other way, completely, like you said, the completely materialist, completely sex-driven choices, and like no responsibility, no. There is that we need to find that accurate, not accurate, but try to get into most accurate sense of freedom. Like, yeah, I can do sexually whatever I want, but I still want to keep the value of my sexual uh whatever I'm going to trade with other people, like, because I still have this power of like to try to trade with someone that I really want to do this relationship, because there is such a thing. Like what it sounds like, we have one side, the conservatives, saying like, oh, if you show your body, you can be raped. And the other side saying like, no, I can show my body, I can have sex in the middle of the street, and I still want to not be called a whore. And it's like, no, we can't have either or. I don't want to stand in either of these sides. I'm a little bit more centrist in pretty much all my positions, and is when I want to like, no, talk about that, to show the feminists that they do have responsibility over their acts. So it's like, yeah, if you want to dress up as a whore and behave as a whore, you can, but you can't blame other people from judging you like that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. By the way, I think nudity is great. I mean, it's in a certain time and place.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think there's not posing nude is not the same as getting drilled by a room full of people. Like there is like those are not, to me. I don't think those are the same thing. I think a tasteful sort of sharing of one's body, I think is beautiful. If you got a body, I see nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, some of these feminists, intersectional feminists, they end up kind of circling back to this anti-sex view, where they see sex as exploitation, and they see sex as an act of aggression. They see all sex as rape. Yeah. So I was thinking about, like, as I was talking about the bukkake porn, like a girl getting covered by many gentlemen. Like I have a music video called "Am I Gay?" I don't know if you've seen this, but it's
Yes, yes, yes.
interestingly, like I didn't
It's
direct.
a really good one. I like your acting.
Thank you. I'm a natural born actor, but interestingly, I didn't direct that video. Like the choice to have all that lotion covering everyone was made by the director, and I wanted him to execute his vision. I didn't have a problem with it. It just, interestingly, that wasn't my it wasn't my idea. I had imagined sort of like maybe some wrestling happening and some kind of suggestive scenes, but he said, "Oh no, we're gonna get a bunch of lotion and just cover everyone with this lotion." And that video really upset a lot of people. Like, I think a lot of people thought it was just really, really too vulgar, which I guess I understand. I just, like, to me, yeah, it was lotion. I just remember having a bunch of sunscreen thrown onto me.
I can't believe people taking serious that.
It is, yeah, it's clearly a joke, but as I was talking about, a woman getting covered by a bunch of semen, I was thinking like, yeah, someone could try to like say like, oh, what about you getting covered? It's like, okay, it was sort of over the top on purpose, but also it wasn't even my idea. So it kind of shows, it tells you something about the director that that's what he wanted to do with the video. Interestingly, maybe it says something about his view of psychologically revealing, maybe. But to me, the lyrics are kind of like what I wrote. Like it's still plenty suggestive, but it doesn't really bring to mind just an absurd amount of white stuff being poured on somebody. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, let's ask you about the copper cap.
Yeah.
You were about to explain to me the copper cap. So where did it start? I tried to search. I find a lot of interactions and a lot of talking over each other. But where did this start? Explain a little bit of what is the copper cap interaction.
I think I first spoke to him on like a group live stream on, I think it was this guy named Politipod. It was his channel. He brought me on and said like, oh, Copper Cab is talking shit. He wants to talk to you. And I was like, okay. Now he had been in my video, my Ginger video, like my song. I remember like looking up gingers on like YouTube to just find like some footage related to gingers. And of course he came up. And so I have this guy like say, we do have souls and gingers do have souls. So I've got this guy basically mouthing the lyrics for me. So I used him in it. But then when I spoke to him, he was like, it's always going to be unclear if he's trolling. I mean, he clearly is trolling, right? Like he's definitely messing with everyone. But he was kind of like, yeah, fuck you. And I said, all right, why don't we do a song together? And he said, okay. So I said, all right, great. We'll do this song about Jake Paul, who coincidentally had blown up. He was already the fastest growing channel on YouTube, but then his song "It's Everyday Bro" just blew up insanely big. So,
is that very gay, bro?
So I said, let's do "It's Very Gay, Bro." I said, record your verse and send it over. And he didn't get it to me in time. So I released the version without him on it, with just me doing his verse for him. And he, of course, then he did give me his verse. So we had the second version with the second verse. So it was a fun thing.
That's why it's like the second version, and then you did a little bit on like
it was fun.
Just talking about it, no?
I was watching a lot of Leafy. Leafy is here, the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So Leafy would have like a series where like Billy the Fridge or someone is like stalking him, and then like kind of this like ongoing story being told.
I don't know much about Leafy. I've seen him another day when I was searching about the criticism on gamer girls.
Everyone
kind of a gamer girl, so I was like trying to develop my gamer girl side, like putting me playing video games. I normally just display the gameplays, and some people have talked about like do more like streaming and make more videos on, and I wanted to check on like what is about, and like not do be a little bit more original, not do the same thing. And I found the Leafy criticism on gamer girls, and it's pretty funny video. It's a good video.
Yeah, I find him very funny. A lot of people like to hate on him, but they're just jealous. Let's be honest. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what it is that bothers people, but to me, I've always found him very funny. And then he would sort of like revisit an issue, like he'll kind of update you on a story. So I got to kind of do some of that with Copper Cab, where like I would show him threatening me and then show me in front of the green screen, lifting weights, going like, what's that? And then like kind of turning it into kind of this series. So it was fun. It's not really the type of content I'm probably going to do very often, but it was a fun little episode, little era. Someone just brought it up to me the other day. It was interesting. Someone like I met like brought up the whole Copper Cab thing. Interesting that it resonated with people.
Interesting enough, we watched it another day. Like just yesterday, we watched a video of Milo, because you have done video of Milo too. It's one of my favorite songs. Is the Milo.
Wow. That's cool.
But it's like it's interesting because there are like the Sargon video, the Milo video. There are videos that I shared on my YouTube channel, but I know that like the niche is smaller because they need to know the person. You know, like they need to know Sargon or Milo. But it's a great video. And we were watching Milo's video, like one of the last release yesterday, and it looks like there is copper cap in the back. And I was like, what
Wow.
is Copper Kevin's doing there? I don't know if it's someone that looks like him or you
I
do.
don't know, but like the Sargon song is a little more universal, like a gamer who gets angry and turns into this hero. Like that's, I think people can watch that and take something from it, even if they don't know who Sargon is. But with Milo, I wrote that parody. So Milo was on, the Bill Maher show when he was on, and it was just so powerful, right? Like this guy, man, he's unstoppable. Just nothing seems to hold him back. Everywhere he goes, he goes on HBO and starts bad mouthing Sarah Silverman and Amy Schumer and Lena Dunham, and it's like amazing. He's like breaking the fourth wall. But then so I wrote that parody and I was like, yeah, oh man, I wrote this parody about how Milo is unstoppable. And then Monday comes around of that like right after that weekend, Monday comes around and the media just releases all these things about Milo that really, I think showed that he is stoppable. But he, the person Milo could have been would have moved past that successfully. But I think what does Milo really have to say? Nothing too original. He's latched onto conservatism, which is uninspiring. And it's like, yeah, like it's some of the things he says are very bold, but a lot of what he says is just so mundane, and you don't need to hear them from him. So people got over this excitement of like, oh my God, this guy's gay and conservative. Whoa, I can't believe he's gay and not politically correct. Whoa, like people kind of got over that after a year or two, and people kind of moved on. But the person Milo might have been, I think, is someone who could have really
But
that.
I think it's a little bit on like that. I did identitarianism war, like on like blacks cannot be, or like blacks have to be Democrats, immigrants have to be Democrats, and all this identitarianism in politics is what make those new icons come so like they are trending now, like it's like Milo came, like yeah, he was broken down by like the witch hunt because it happens to pretty much everybody around. Like you become famous and then they start trying to go after your past and try to find something to break you down. And but no, I think it's a little bit trending. I would say like it's not a little bit on like Candace Owens because she's black and she is Trump supporter and she's like not Democrat, and it's like, and she speaks out of because of that. Like you don't need to follow the masses. You don't need to follow the collectivism idea. It's a little bit good. I
Well,
think
yeah.
it's a good movement for the individualism. Like you don't need to be part of the group. It's good to break
So
that.
that's where the excitement came from at the beginning. Like, oh, this person is not playing by the rules and they're showing signs of individualism. So there's that at first, but then like I said, that excitement dies down and you realize what is this
Yeah,
person
because a lot of
actually
people end up
what is
ending.
Milo actually offering as an alternative to the intersectional feminist? What's he offering? Religion and family, family values that he himself isn't abiding by. What's Candace Owens really offering? Nationalism, following Trump off the edge of the earth. Like she's not an individualist. She's saying the black community needs to stop letting the Democrat Party rape us. So why should the black community do anything but turn to individualism? They should turn to individualism. So there's individualism and then there's everything else. And since is almost nobody is proposing individualism, these arguments are superficial. So that's why I've gotten kind of jaded about the whole thing. Once I realized the kind of the Sargons of the world, he makes arguments like, oh, studies show that video games don't cause violence and sexism. Okay, great. So then Sargon gets a big following of people that are excited by that, but it's a superficial it's a superficial argument. So ultimately,
You
there's
think it's missing? What you're missing is like some type of political representativity of of data ideology, of the objectivist individualist in politics, like to say like, no, we're going to protect the individual freedom as well, give more. No, we don't need to give more responsibility, because we do have laws that will input responsibility over your acts already. So it's just like behave more into that way forward.
There's no representation of individualism in any intellectual arena. So politics is the last step, the last stage of the game. In epistemology, in science, in psychology, in ethics, there's no appreciation for the role of consciousness and for the proper marriage between facts and values. The fact that reality does imply how one ought to behave if he wants to survive and flourish. And then you get to politics. Okay, if this is true, that the individual can and must think independently and observe reality and integrate the material properly in order to live, then what's required politically for him to live? The extraction of force. He needs to be free to act by his judgment. So now the government's job is to have a monopoly on initiatory force. So anytime someone a monopoly on retaliatory force.
Okay.
So anytime somebody initiates force, the government's job is to retaliate.
Yeah.
As soon as possible. So that's where individualism is represented in politics, but that's the final stage of the game. Yeah.
It's complicated. It's like no representativity at all.
Well, it's complicated, but it's also simple. I think once you just lay it out like that, it's.
And I think it's a little bit on the fight, because like since there is nobody to represent this side, the other side just straw man and say like, oh, you want the anarchy, you don't want government. It's like, no, we still want the government to protect the individual from whatever force is negative toward it.
Yeah, so this is why objectivists need to do a good job explaining why they're not anarchists, why they're not libertarians. You know, the libertarian tent includes a lot of anarchist thinkers and anarchist advocates.
Is there anybody alive that has like podcasts or anything that you follow? You listen to, or you just try to literate yourself, like reading more and talking?
Well, you know, I have a long documented intellectual relationship with a guy Charles II on my commentary channel. He recently said some things about me that I didn't think were at least right to say when I'm not there to give my opinion. And I haven't seen him release anything new since then, so I'm not sure what his deal is. Yes, I followed him for many years. I think at this point I'm ready to listen to a philosopher. Like I've had enough. I think Yaron is pretty good. I think he's pretty great, but he's not a philosopher, and objectivism is a philosophy. So I long for someone like Peikoff. Leonard Peikoff was like the original like champion, like the original soldier, like to keep it going after Ayn Rand passed away. Like so like Harry Binswanger is really great. He's behind a paywall. He has a subscription show, the Harry Binswanger Letter. And also, so I've been listening to John Ridpath. He's another old school. He's retired now. Very clear explanation of history, the history of philosophy and all these things. Religion, he speaks a lot about religion. John Ridpath, Ridpath. Excellent lectures on religion and on philosophy. I mean, look, there's almost any objectivist.
Did you go to a school, like a philosophy school or something like that?
No, I barely went to school. I just really love this stuff. So I read a lot of what Ayn Rand.
When did you start with this all reading on this, and you start being curious about it? Because you
Uh,
have not stopped. I know you still.
yeah, not stopping. I read The Fountainhead when I was 15, I think, 15, and then read Atlas Shrugged and read all of Ayn Rand's
Did you
fiction.
go for those things because you were mad and trying to find yourself, something like that? Or like you said, you had this state of like feeling uncomfortable?
I was looking for answers for sure. And so I was interested in ideas, and I heard this Ayn Rand I heard of, just such a certain, she had such certainty. And I start reading her book, The Fountainhead. This is the coolest thing ever. Um, So yes, it was that. Now, understanding how this book applies to life and how what I'm capable of. Am I capable of being anything like the character in this book? Was something left to sort of explore and figure out much later. It unfortunately doesn't happen overnight. So some of my worst days were still ahead of me, but that's where it started. And you can really you can look at like the history of philosophy in general, like as the Enlightenment is happening, as the Age of Reason is happening, the anti-Enlightenment is emerging. Like Immanuel Kant and Hegel, they're just kind of trying to destroy reason, while you've got the American experiment taking place as a result of the Age of Reason. So all these things are sort of happening. So I guess similar to me, even though I was very much in this dark place, and the darkness and the destruction was going to continue moving forward, but I was sort of like discovering this positivity, which would ultimately be a source of guidance and inspiration. So yeah, I mean, but ever since then, I've been kind of continuously reading and listening to
Mhm.
lectures, and yeah, like a lot of objectivists have provided a lot of valuable content. Ultimately, I think the today's objectivists could do a better job giving like philosophical essentials, like just getting right to the point. But I think they don't want to do that because they don't want to be dogmatic. Like they don't want to cultivate dogmatic objectivists. But I think I disagree. I think there's the right way to do it, which is what Leonard Peikoff did. He was the real deal, and he had the um, the strong support of Ayn Rand. Not that she wanted there to be like an objectivist movement, but she very much endorsed the way Leonard Peikoff explained philosophy, as far as I know. So yeah, yeah. So no, I never went to philosophy school. I never had any formal training.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of learning this as I go. The way I like to think about it is I don't learn anything I don't plan to use. So to me, like studying epistemology and concept formation, to me, this ties directly to happiness. This ties directly to creativity. This ties directly to all types of values out there to pursue inner happiness. You know, getting farther and farther away from from that discomfort from my younger years, I think is something that philosophy provides. And
Have you been more
uh,
into like epistemology? Like you watch things on epistemology and stuff?
I just read Ayn Rand's book called Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology.
Yeah.
Before that, I read Leonard Peikoff's book called Objectivism: The Philosophy of Ayn Rand, where he walks through every branch of objectivism, every branch of philosophy, and a lot of that is epistemology and other, metaphysics and so on. So I read that. Just read the epistemology book. Now I'm reading Harry Binswanger's book called How We Know, which is like more epistemology. And that's what I'm interested in. I think a big part of what made me so interested in epistemology is seeing people like Jordan Peterson being out there giving his opinion. And what's
There's
the
no method.
what's the alternative? Like there's not nearly enough clarity on that. So I want to understand. What is the objectivist alternative to what we're seeing? And I want to understand Sam Harris. I want to understand Ben Shapiro. I want to understand what are their premises? Where are they
Yes.
coming from? So,
It sounds really cool. Yeah.
yeah.
It's exactly the word that we use most of the time in epistemology. Is like this will of understand the other side, because it's exactly what I was talking about on like making this the argument of their argument. You really need to be able to construct the argument to like shape properly delimitate what is their claim and their arguments in the best proper way to be able to beat, because it's easy to burn a straw man. It's that is the thing on the argumentation philosophy. It's like it's really easy to beat a straw man when you build this silly, ugly argument for the other side and you beat him up. It's really easy, but you really need to be able to find out what is the other person trying, or then becomes like what made Jordan Peterson so famous.
Yeah,
What
I want to not only understand the opposition, but I want to understand like what were the errors that I made when I was younger? What were the implicit philosophical turns that I took when I left religion? But where did I end up? Why did I go to such a nihilistic place and it politically embraced authoritarianism? I thought, yeah, authoritarianism is the only way to deal with people because we're so irrational and reckless.
Can you tell us a little bit about this? What is
Yeah.
going through this? It's like, how was this breaking down out of religion?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised an Orthodox Jew, and this was very serious. My upbringing would make Ben Shapiro look like kind of a slacker by comparison. He's out there, he's tweeting about HBO, he's taking pictures with women where he's got his arm around them. I mean, that is a lot of Orthodox Jews. They don't touch the opposite sex because it's inappropriate. But I at a very young age, like I told you about, I was writing these lyrics and I was so into that type of creativity and this sort of like offensive, vulgar content. To me, that symbolized a maybe somewhat misguided turn to the sort of more pagan approach to things, kind of this reality-based, earth-based celebration of life. Rock music, I thought, was really just inspiring too, punk rock. And so I did away with religion. I said, this doesn't work for me. This is not the life that I want. But then what's the alternative? Like what is the positive value? You need a positive value. So that's why I was saying before, like doing away with identity politics doesn't give you a positive course of action. It doesn't give you something positive to advocate for. So in the several years after doing away with religion, I was just sort of without purpose. And I was asking like, well, then what is moral then? Is it all subjective? Yeah, I pretty much concluded it's just people disagreeing with one another. So I might have ended up a Jordan Peterson fan today if I were still alive, assuming I would have still been alive and all that, like the route I would have taken. I could see myself going that route where I'm sort of this reckless skeptic, sort of pleasure chasing hedonist, and then I see this politically correct attack on video games and entertainment, and then I join the anti-social justice. Even though I relate to the social justice people in a certain way, the way they're sort of taking their ideas to a logical extreme, I think is something I might have been on board with. But at the same time, I also was always very like rebellious and politically incorrect. So it's hard to say which side of that I would have ended up on. But by the time someone like Jordan Peterson came around, I might have been very, very deeply inspired by what he was offering. So I want to understand what it is that he's saying and why people are drawn to him, because that very well might have been me. And what Peterson is offering is mediocrity. Ultimately, mediocrity is better than death. Mediocrity is better than reckless, nonsensical action. But mediocrity is not as good as it gets. So I'm much more inspired by Ayn Rand's, vision of man as a heroic being. That's what I'm about.
That's nice.
True.
What you can tell a little bit about yourself, like your personal life? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do? You don't play video games.
I do. I play like old school video games. I play like 90s side scroller games, but I do them while listening to stuff. So to me, it's just something to do while I listen to a podcast or a lecture or something, or I'm on the phone. So I play Mario and Sonic.
Multitask.
Yeah, it's like to have something to do with my hands and eyes while I'm listening to something. I'm into Sonic and Mario and Donkey Kong Country and stuff like that. So I do that, but like I say, I'm consuming.
You don't have a PS4.
No, I have a Wii U. No, I actually don't have a Wii anymore. I just have a Wii U, which includes a Wii kind of built in. And I have an Xbox 360 that I never play. And I have a Retron 5. I have like a device that plays old cartridge games of like every kind. So I play like Genesis and Super
I was just
Nintendo and
mentioning it because there is Sonic. The
mhm.
Sonic game on the PS4, so if you
Yeah,
like.
but it isn't that great. I've played it. Is it Generations or Sonic 4? I mean, I appreciate that they're paying some lip service to what Sonic used to be, but it kind of sucks. It's not the real thing.
Okay, so great. I think we did a really good coverage of pretty much everything.
Yeah.
It's like I really appreciate your work and all the philosophy around too. I really like talking. I like that more over of those things. It's and yeah, I appreciate and thank you very much for being here with us.
No, thank you. You're a bit outside the demographic of who I thought my audience was. I still assume they're all a bunch of reckless adolescent male audience members. So
No,
this
I
is
don't think so. I think
mhm,
you're more political than you think. Like not in
philosophical.
the way that yes. I think people that can enjoy your comedy will be from like that, from like people that just want to laugh at some songs, but a lot of people that really support free speech and like edgy comedy. And I think everybody should check. It's a lot of good material. I like the videos. I enjoy not just the lyrics. Some videos are really great, and yeah, everything is awesome. Uh, I think I'm gonna finish here with with the recording. If you
All right.
if
Well,
you
thanks
don't
so
mind,
much for
we can keep a little bit
yeah,
after to
yeah.
have
We
like
could
an after recording. Okay.
totally wait. Thanks for having me on. And yes, you're right. A lot of people like the free speech and the edginess, but also a lot of people are looking for answers, and a lot of people they want to know, they want to get to that deeper level. So I hope I'm providing something when I sort of introduce people to Ayn Rand, or I talk about getting sober and doing it from a secular perspective. So, yeah, thank you. I do appreciate it. And this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.